Now in its fourth year, the war in Ukraine has caused death and destruction on an almost unimaginable scale. In response to the unpredictable security situation, European governments have vowed to massively boost defense spending. The biggest military buildup is expected from Germany, which recently announced plans to spend an additional 500 billion euros on defense over the next decade. Rheinmetall, which is Germany's largest defense contractor, is expected to be one of the biggest beneficiaries of this rearmament program. Immediately prior to the outbreak of the war in Ukraine, Rheinmetall's shares traded for 90 euros each, giving the company a market capitalization of approximately 4 billion euros. As of the time of recording this video, its share price has increased to 1,450 euros, giving it a market capitalization of 63 billion. The valuation has increased 15-fold. In this video, we'll look at the history of Rheinmetall and how it became Germany's largest defense company. We'll then analyze whether or not European rearmament can possibly justify the meteoric rise in the company's stock price. Rheinmetall was founded as a weapons manufacturer in the late 1800s. In 1898, they created the first ever barrel recoil cannon fit for field service. It's called barrel recoil because the barrel moves back after firing. During the First World War, they mostly made artillery guns and ammunition. Following Germany's defeat in 1918, the Treaty of Versailles placed stringent limits on the size of its military and military industries. So in the early 1920s, Rheinmetall shifted its focus to civilian industries, including trains. However, the German government started to covertly violate the Treaty of Versailles almost as soon as it was signed. Rheinmetall was a willing accomplice. The German government awarded a contract to Rheinmetall to develop and build the Licht tractor, or light tractor. Officially, this was supposed to be a tractor for use on farms. In reality, it was a tank. When the National Socialists took over in 1933, they stopped even pretending to abide by the Treaty of Versailles. Rheinmetall went back to its core competency of making large guns, including artillery, anti-aircraft, and tank guns. During World War II, Rheinmetall was one of the most important producers of guns for the Third Reich. For example, here's a Panzer III tank with a 50mm cannon produced by Rheinmetall. However, they never made tank hulls. The hull of the Panzer III was made by Daimler-Benz, the parent company of Mercedes. Following Germany's defeat, the victorious Allies dismantled most of the country's military industries, including Rheinmetall. By the 1950s, the Cold War was heating up. NATO realized that West Germany's formidable industrial base could be a key asset in their arms race against the Soviet Union. So West Germany began a massive rearmament program, with Rheinmetall again playing a key role. But after more than a decade sitting idle, Rheinmetall had fallen behind its foreign competitors. In 1965, the Leopard 1 tank entered service with the West German Army. Its 105mm gun was made by Rheinmetall, but they didn't design it. They instead purchased a license to manufacture a British-designed gun. In 1979, the Leopard 2 tank entered service and is still in service to this day. It has a 120mm gun designed and built by Rheinmetall. Today, Rheinmetall tank guns are widely regarded as some of the best in the world. In addition to making the guns, Rheinmetall also now makes tank turrets. Some versions of the Leopard 2 use Rheinmetall turrets. In an ironic twist of fate, the new British Challenger 3 tank will use a Rheinmetall gun. Germany's membership in NATO has been hugely beneficial to Rheinmetall. Designing and building armored vehicles is very expensive, requiring massive fixed investments. If you're a small country that only needs a few dozen tanks, it's not worthwhile to build your own. So smaller NATO countries tend to buy military hardware from their larger allies. Since 1979, 3,600 Leopard 2 tanks have been built. 2,100 of them were ordered by the German military. 1,500 were ordered by other countries. The Leopard 2 is currently in service in 16 countries. Rheinmetall has 4 operating segments: Vehicle Systems, Weapons and Ammunition, Electronic Solutions, and Power Systems. While Rheinmetall has historically focused mostly on guns and other subcomponents, they recently started making entire armored vehicles as well. For example, in 2016 they released the Lynx infantry fighting vehicle, which is designed and built entirely by Rheinmetall. This is within the Vehicle Systems segment. They also make a wide variety of wheeled military trucks through a joint venture with the German truck company MAN. And finally, they make some engineering and other specialized vehicles, some of which are on tracked hulls. The Weapons and Armaments segment consists of guns and ammunition. Rheinmetall makes a wide variety of guns for tanks, towed artillery, self-propelled artillery, and anti-aircraft. In addition to making the guns, Rheinmetall also makes artillery and tank ammunition. Next is the Electronic Solutions segment. This makes fire control systems and other computers inside tanks and other military vehicles. Finally, the Power Systems segment makes parts for the engines of armored vehicles. They also make diesel-electric generators for submarines. As it turns out, the guns and munitions Rheinmetall makes are in very high demand due to the war in Ukraine. As NATO countries, including Germany, supplied large quantities of military hardware to Ukraine, their own stockpiles started to run dangerously low. In 2022, the German government established a special €100 billion fund to rearm its military. Of this €100 billion, €80 billion was earmarked for procurement. Rheinmetall was the single largest beneficiary of this. The company says it expects to receive €35 billion worth of orders from this fund, or almost half of the total. At the same time, many other European countries are also increasing defense spending. They're increasing their orders for Rheinmetall products and products containing Rheinmetall parts. This is very important, as approximately 70% of Rheinmetall's revenue comes from outside of Germany, mostly from NATO member states. In 2021, the year before the war began, Rheinmetall generated €5.7 billion of revenue and posted an operating profit of €600 million. By 2024, revenue had almost doubled to €9.8 billion, and operating profit more than doubled to €1.5 billion. And if you're a Rheinmetall shareholder, there are reasons to be even more optimistic for the future. It takes time to ramp up production. New factories need to be set up, and new workers need to be trained. When a new order is placed, it may take years before the product is delivered. Since 2022, Rheinmetall's order backlog has more than doubled, from €26 billion to €55 billion. This order book all but guarantees continued strong revenue growth for at least the next few years. In 2025, the newly elected German government announced plans to increase defense spending by €500 billion over the next decade. A significant portion of this is expected to go to Rheinmetall. The cutoff of Russian gas and the threat of a potential trade war with the US has caused severe economic anxiety across Europe. Germany itself has already been experiencing a recession for the past 2 years. If you want to learn more about Germany's economic troubles, we made a video exploring this a few weeks ago. But a falling tide does not necessarily sink all ships. Since the beginning of the Ukraine war, Rheinmetall's share price has increased 15-fold, adding approximately €60 billion to its market cap. Rheinmetall has clearly benefited and will likely continue to benefit from the war. But can this really justify such an astronomical surge in its share price? Immediately prior to the war, Rheinmetall had a market capitalization of approximately €4 billion. In 2021, they generated €5.7 billion of revenue and reported an operating profit of €600 million. In 2024, Rheinmetall generated €9.8 billion and posted an operating profit of €1.5 billion. Their operating profit margin increased from 10% of revenue in 2021 to 15% in 2024. This is the result of greater fixed cost absorption and supply-demand dynamics pushing up the prices of military equipment. As of April 2025, Rheinmetall's market capitalization was €63 billion. So while the operating profit has increased, the market capitalization increased much more. The ratio of market cap to operating profit grew from 7 times to 42 times. This is because investors expect revenue and profits to continue to increase for years to come. So just how much profit will Rheinmetall need to make to justify its current valuation? The pre-war valuation ratio of 7 times may have undervalued Rheinmetall stock. For the sake of simplicity, let's say that a fair multiple is 10 times. To justify its current market cap of €63 billion, Rheinmetall needs to eventually generate annual operating profits of €6.3 billion. Assuming the operating margin remains at 15%, they need to eventually generate €42 billion of annual revenue. This is 4 times greater than what they made in 2024 and 7 times greater than what they made in 2021. The new German government plans to increase defense spending by €500 billion over the next decade, or €50 billion per year. But not all of this will go to weapons procurement. Militaries have many other expenses as well. You need to train, feed, and pay your soldiers. You need to maintain your military bases, along with many other expenses. In fact, NATO recommends that its member states spend only 20% of their defense budget on equipment. Remember that in 2022, Germany established a special defense fund worth €100 billion. This was on top of their normal defense budget. Of that $100 billion, $80 billion was earmarked for equipment, of which Rheinmetall expects to receive $35 billion. This was not normal defense spending. It was a special fund specifically intended to replace equipment that had been donated to Ukraine. And it's not just Germany. Many NATO countries have severely depleted their own arsenals for the same reason. This chart shows the percentage of defense budgets spent on equipment for each NATO member state. The light blue bars represent 2014, while the dark blue bars represent 2024. Back in 2014, most NATO countries were actually below the 20% guideline. In 2024, almost all of them were significantly above the guideline. Germany spent 29% of its total defense spending on equipment. Poland more than 50%. This was clearly a huge benefit to Rheinmetall and explains why their revenue and order book has surged over the past 3 years. But this cannot last forever. Eventually, NATO countries will have rebuilt their depleted arsenals, and demand for new equipment will decrease back to more normal levels. You could argue that European militaries were too small to begin with, so they should increase their arsenals beyond what they had pre-war. This may very well be true, but you also need more soldiers, military bases, and all the supporting infrastructure. There's no particular reason to believe that the percentage of spending on equipment should increase in the long run. Germany now plans to increase defense spending by 50 billion euros per year. At the 20% guideline, this will result in 10 billion euros of new procurement. Even if half of that goes to Rheinmetall, that's only 5 billion euros of new revenue. Based on our previous back-of-the-envelope math, their annual revenue needs to increase by at least 30 billion euros to justify their current valuation. And there's yet another problem. Even if all the European countries decide to spend trillions of euros on equipment indefinitely, this does not guarantee a favorable outcome for Rheinmetall shareholders. After 2 years of recession, Germany is facing severe economic difficulties. Demand at food banks is rising. Millions of pensioners now face poverty due to high inflation. A lot of this hardship has been caused by the Ukraine war and subsequent cutoff of Russian gas. The optics of a publicly traded defense company profiting massively from the war are very bad. Imagine that you are a German pensioner struggling to make ends meet, and you see that Rheinmetall's share price has increased 15-fold at the expense of the taxpayer. You probably wouldn't be too happy. Something similar happened a few years ago. In 2022, European natural gas prices surged as Russian supplies were cut off. There is some natural gas extraction within Europe, mostly in the Netherlands and off the coast of Ireland. The European gas producers reaped huge profits from the high prices. One of these companies was Vermilion Energy. While they are headquartered in Canada, they own natural gas fields in the Netherlands and Ireland. In 2022, they made huge profits and their stock price surged. In late 2022, the European Union imposed so-called windfall taxes on all oil and gas production within its jurisdiction. As a result of this windfall tax, almost all of Vermilion's profits were expropriated, and the stock gave up all of its gains. Why should we expect anything different for Rheinmetall? Alright guys, that wraps it up for this video. What do you think about Rheinmetall? Let us know in the comments section below. As always, thank you so much for watching and we'll see you in the next one. Wall Street Millennial, signing out.